Mr. President, I rise today to talk about an experience I had this weekend that, to me, was extremely memorable. I used to live in Texas. I used to be involved in businesses in the Valley, as they call it there, from Brownsville to Weslaco to Edinburgh to McAllen. This past weekend, a good colleague of mine, Senator Steve Daines from Montana, and I traveled down to the southern border to visit the Customs and Border Patrol people, to visit with ICE people, and to see firsthand what's going on a typical night. We were there overnight, Sunday night, and had a remarkable evening and saw firsthand what these people are up against. Before I make my comments, I want to say that from Deputy Chief Ortiz all the way down in the organization, in that sector, the McAllen sector that we were in, the best of America is in uniform right now, every day and night, protecting our rights and privileges here in the United States. I was proud to meet these people and be a part of this trip. But what we saw this weekend, Mr. President, is disturbing on many levels. We spoke directly with Border Patrol agents. We went to the retention center. We saw firsthand that we have not just an illegal immigration issue there, we have a national security crisis, and we saw it firsthand. This is a situation that the border agents face every day, and it's a grim situation. It's shameful that we here in Congress have not given Border Patrol agents adequate resources to do their jobs. First, the real tragedy at the border is the dramatic increase in illegal drug trafficking. Even though the conversation in this room wants to deal mainly with illegal immigration across that border, in this sector, the drug traffic increases are remarkable. In the entire southern border, we see this year alone, fiscal year 18, now this is from October 1 to today, we've had a 22% increase in heroin seized at the southern border alone, 38% increase in methamphetamine, and a 73% increase in fentanyl. The amount of fentanyl seized by ICE so far this year is enough to kill every American citizen by overdose. Let me say that again. The tonnage of fentanyl, it's up 73% this year across the entire southern border. The amount seized, and that's not 100% of what's crossing that border, 73% increase over last year. The tonnage that's been seized this year is enough to kill every American citizen by overdose. And it was so remarkable, Mr. President, is that they estimate that only 7 to 10% of the drugs that are attempting to come across the border are actually interdicted. Less than 10%. And that's consistent with what our Southcom combatant commander tells us repeatedly year after year. By the end of FY19, CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, will have seized 1.7 million pounds of narcotics at the border. The Border Patrol agents we spoke to estimate they're only able to stop, again, about 10%, and that's because they don't have the resources. The movement of drugs from Mexico to the U.S. at the southern border is the greatest drug threat to our country. These drugs pouring across the border are destroying communities across the nation. Congress has got to act to give these Border Patrol agents and our ICE agents the infrastructure they need to address this dramatic spike in illegal drug trafficking. I know that the illegal immigration topic is a top topic. I don't disagree with that. But we are not talking about this at the level that we should be. We have had historic opioid legislation. I was a supporter of that. Now we need to move on and make sure that we secure the southern border. The second point I want to make is that agents on the ground told us how Mexican drug cartels just across the border use migrants, these illegal immigrants coming up out of Central America, to camouflage what they're doing and to distract our border agents from the real war that's going on, and that's the intrusion of illegal drugs into the country. The cartels charge a toll for every individual that comes through their area of control. And it's amazing right now that the charge is $8,000 per person, Mr. President. There are some estimates that this toll business on illegal immigrants coming across the southern border is somewhere around $2.1 billion in revenue for the cartels. Now, these are the illegal cartels just south of the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. This doesn't count for the billions of dollars these cartels earn off the drug trade every year, which is the primary business. There are some estimates, Mr. President, that the $2 billion they get in tolls for illegal immigrants coming across into the U.S. is overshadowed by some tenfold numbers relative to the drug trade. Some estimates are $25 to $30 billion of first cost value in revenue of the drugs that are coming across that border. Many of the illegal immigrants being exploited by these cartels are unaccompanied children and family units. We met some of these people, Mr. President. It breaks your heart. These people have, the numbers of these have surged in our southern border since 2014 to claim asylum. This massive surge is due to loopholes in our asylum and immigration laws. These laws allow unaccompanied minors and family units to easily assert broad asylum claims. And again, the number of family units, individuals with children, and unaccompanied children has skyrocketed over the last 5 years. Due to certain provisions of the law, court rulings currently enforced, these children and individuals are released in the United States while they are theoretically waiting for their formal removal proceedings to begin months or years down the road. These loopholes, combined with programs like DACA, have led to a staggering increase in the number of unaccompanied children and family units at the border. In FY19 to date, there's a 280% increase in the number of family units apprehended at the border compared to the same point in FY18. Just 1 year ago, 280% increase. The monthly apprehension numbers we're currently seeing even surpass those during the Obama administration. I think this chart shows it best. We see what happened over here under the last administration in blue. This is a dramatic increase in the number of illegal apprehensions at the southern border, primarily driven by catch and release and the creation of and the implementation of some of these loopholes that we're talking about right now. But that was a dramatic increase, more than 2.5 times increase, 250% in just 8 years. The word got out that the new president, who was elected in November right here, said, well, we're going to enforce the law, and they began to do that. And we saw a dramatic decrease in illegal immigrants coming across the border, a dramatic decrease. Then there was a court case that said, well, you can't really do that. That court case is being appealed, and what we've seen now since then is that cartels are back in business. This is one measure of the drug trade that we don't talk about. These are the poor souls that are coming across our border illegally right now. Finally, after this trip, and by the way, we're at a point now that's higher than at the peak during the Obama administration. People say, well, we don't have a crisis there. It's not a problem. Well, the numbers are down. I don't know what numbers they're looking at, but these are the numbers. This is facts. I believe right now that we have a full-blown crisis at the southern border. And I'm not trying to define how we use money to put up a border wall or anything. That's not what I'm trying to do in this conversation. What I'm trying to do is point out that we have a full-blown crisis of illegal immigrants and illegal drugs crossing the southern border. I saw it firsthand on patrol with our border agents over the weekend. And I'm contrasting that to years ago when I used to go across that same border when this was not a crisis. The last 4 presidents, Mr. President, have built 654 miles of barrier across. We saw some of it in this sector. 654 miles of barrier. Now, we have 2,000 miles of total southern border. The 4 presidents, from George H.W. Bush all the way to President Obama, have built border barriers because they all agreed that this is a crisis. It was intended to stop drug trafficking or slow down drug trafficking and the illegal incursion of illegal immigrants. President Obama built 135 miles. President Trump has 124 miles under construction right now. What we've been talking about here in the last few weeks is just 55 miles today. We hear today is an additional 55 miles. But the question is, do these barriers work? Well, we have three areas where over the last 30 years, border barriers have been built: San Diego, Tucson, El Paso, and we have actual numbers to see that the illegal crossing of drugs and illegal immigrants in those areas sectors where those barriers were put up dropped 95%. But what they've done is they've pushed this traffic to areas that don't have those barriers. And one of those was the McAllen district that we visited this weekend. 250 miles of border across 19 counties. It's a crisis down there. And what we're trying to do right now is 50 miles of barrier and 35 gaps in it. They have 55 miles that was built in 2006 in this sector. It's totally ineffective. The quickest thing we could do in that sector, Mr. President, is close the 35 gaps. They were supposed to be gates. There are no gates there. There's some litigation to that, but we need to fix that and make that barrier effective. The United States Capitol Police, which does such an outstanding job protecting members of Congress, our staff, and the Capitol building and several blocks around it every day, employs about 2,000 officers. The Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington has over 4,000 to help protect an area of 68 square miles. Now let's put that in perspective. There are 55 miles of barrier, 35 miles of gaps in it, and only 3,000 agents in that entire sector, Mr. President. I think you can see where the problem might be. We've got to give these men and women the tools they need to be successful and to protect our country. The longer we wait to take action, the more money cartels will make off drug trafficking, the more people will die, and the more families will be destroyed. The longer our communities will be in danger. And some estimates show that my home state of Georgia has over 70,000 gang members in it, 70,000. It's a destination for these people. There were Hondurans that were apprehended that night while we were on patrol. We asked them where they're going. One said New York, one said Miami, one said Woodstock, Georgia. As we continue to debate this issue, I want to say clearly and unequivocally, Congress has got to do better. We all must do better, Mr. President. For the men and women who put their lives on the line every day to protect our nation's border, and we must do better for our country. We can start by passing disaster funding for the people of Georgia and other states who are hurting from historic hurricanes and fires. It's outrageous that the funding package being considered here today does nothing to help these farmers and victims of these wildfires out west and hurricanes in the southeast. When President Trump came to Georgia to tour damage after the hurricane, he said farmers really got hurt, especially in Georgia. We're going to get it taken care of. Vice President Pence said, we will rebuild these crops in these communities. We will restore Southwest Georgia. We will restore the Sun Belt bigger and better than ever before. Mr. President, we have a moment right now in time where Congress needs to act. Today, we've got to get this funding done and move forward. We've got to get this disaster relief, I think, move forward in a supplemental if that's what we're going to do. But this has to happen immediately. Disaster relief should be considered right now. No more excuses. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.